Welcome to Eat, Sleep, Wine, Repeat, a podcast for all you wine lovers who, if you're like me, just cannot get enough of the good stuff. I'm Yanina Dore, your host, brand ambassador, wine educator, and sommelier. So stick with me as we dive deeper into this ever-evolving, wonderful world of wine. And wherever you are listening to this, cheers to you. Hello, wine friends. So I am very excited to have Rob Buckhaven back for part 2. And so this episode, I'm going to be picking his brain about what is it really like to be a drinks writer for the Metro. Have you ever wondered what it's like to have that gig? Well, now you will. And whilst Rob shares with us some of his wine discoveries, we will also be talking about his book, The Alcorithm, which examines the flavours and compounds in wines, drinks, food, herbs, to be able to guess what other drink or product you would like next. So get ready to learn more about several different grape varieties, which ones are similar, and learn some wine trends and wine surprises on the way. Now, if you are enjoying these episodes, may I ask you to take 2 minutes to leave a review on the app that you're listening to, as it does make the podcast more discoverable. And of course, you screaming and shouting with your wine-loving friends also does too. So enough of my requests. Let's go over to the chat with Rob now. I want to ask you a question. As a drinks journalist, how often are you actually tasting wine? Everyone wants to know.
Well, really good question.
Don't lie.
So every minute of every day. No. So I get sent samples all the time. Probably you do as well.
Yeah, that is true.
You know, and it's weird because I explain to my friends who aren't in the industry, and it's kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, that's a really bad problem to have. But you really have to temper it because I just don't have the space for the samples. I've got a wine celery kind of thing, but it's constantly, I mean, it can fill up at the drop of a hat. So tasting wise, I'm tasting pretty much every day. I'm tasting things as they come in. So really, so as not to sort of leave them there. So I actually have space. But I realized with my book and stuff like that, that I think organization is key. And by that, I mean is writing in your tasting notes as soon as you do it. So having some kind of spreadsheet, writing in the tasting notes. So it sounds like it should be a really fun experience, but actually it's work. You know, it is work. You're tasting it because you're not going to necessarily write about it that moment or that week or even that month, potentially. Could be a few months down the track. So you've got to remember what you've thought about them, and you don't want to keep on asking for samples. So it's kind of a fine balance. So it is work. And sometimes you're tasting, I mean, if I'm doing a rosé piece for the Metro, for example, I might taste 50 rosés.
Oh, and that's not actually fun. After about, for me, I think my limit is like 20 wines. Once I've done 20 at any tasting, actually, now my mouth starts getting furry. I start getting a little bit distracted. And so actually getting up to 50, you have to really, really focus.
It's basically a whole day. So you've ordered them in for this piece that you're doing. So I did one called the Rainbow of Rosé because I wanted to show that there are more than just Provence. You know, there's all different colors, all different styles, as we know. So I ordered in so many of these. I mean, they were just everywhere. And I remember this was actually in the flat before, and there was limited space. And I remember having to sort of put them by style in different parts of the room. And then I'd kind of put it all on the spreadsheet, and then I'd go, right, okay, that one, then I'd have to label them all. Then they have to be at the right temperature. Then you have to, there is a lot to think about. So generally, I try and keep it down to fewer. So I try to taste as I go, rather than have like a massive sort of mammoth style tasting. But then sometimes if you're working on, for example, it's usually champagne and sparkling wine for Christmas. It's port and fortified wine and, you know, sometimes sherry. So you do have these big epic ones. But generally, it's kind of as you go.
So you're tasting throughout the year, you're making notes. What is it like writing for the Metro? Because you've got to come up with ideas and articles, right? Apart from, here's your perfect Christmas wines at Christmas. What do you write in July? What do you write in March?
You're totally right. Do you know what I've started doing? So I have started, and this is my trade secret, which I'm going to give away. So I've started doing it. You know, everything has a day. So Chardonnay day, Sauvignon Blanc day, pizza day, Pi Day, all of this,
Friendship
like
Day.
international
Yeah.
Friendship Day, International Pet Week, whatever it is. So I basically run my pieces via that calendar of notable
Okay.
events.
That's
So
clever.
if there's a notable thing, if there's like National Pie Week, so I'm trying to go, okay, there's National Pie Week, which wines go really well with pies, or, so you try and keep it topical. That really gives you a structure. Then there's things like Easter, all the other ones. But then equally, Metro loves a trend. So they love a social media trend. So I'm sort of scouring TikTok for the new trends. What are the kids doing? What are people doing with wines? Are they mixing it with ice cream? Are they putting it in a blender? And then as the expert, I'm then trying it out and saying, what do I think? So it's very much keeping yourself, like, yes, you have to be an expert, but you have to also see what's going on and what other people are doing and try and be relatable and, keep it real. So it's that kind of balance.
What did you put in a blender?
Oh my God. Okay. So I put Snoop Dogg's wine, which I've got to say kind of belongs there. I put it in there and it's this Cali Red, which actually isn't that bad. It's very,
sweet,
it's sweet and it's very geared to the US market. But I put it in the blender and weirdly enough, it did aerate it. Not weirdly enough, because you expect it to. But it kind of, the only problem is with a finer wine.
Damn, yeah, it's too much. You're taking away all the nuances.
It's too aggressive. Yeah. And you're basically separating it in a weird way. So you're separating out all the flavors. But I think with a wine like that is so beefy and big and doesn't matter, anything goes, I think it's fine.
So wait, conclusion on this, right? Anyone who's getting a big bold red at like 7, 8, 9 pounds, maybe if they want to throw it in a blender, it probably might make it a bit better.
Do it, yeah, but only a couple of goes on the NutriBullet. Like, don't do too long.
That's so specific. No, but I agree. Unless you've got as well a very fragile wine with age or something very, very premium, like I will happily take that bottle of wine and like throw it into a decanter. No grace, like boom, 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 and the wine is glugging away. And I'll happily double decant it, triple decant it, and like just throw it about a bit. So, NutriBullet is a bit more aggressive for me. It's going a bit further, but at the same time, for a very young, juicy wine, well, okay, cool. There we go.
Not everyone has a decanter. Obviously there are other things you can use, but I'm all about using stuff in the home as much as you can. Use stuff you've already got. And also if you're time poor, if it's not damaging the wine. So, if you don't have a decanter, take a vase, for example. NutriBullet shouldn't be the first thing you go to, but if you're desperate to aerate a wine, it's really not opening up and it tastes a bit weird, then just put it in for a couple of pulses in there. And it's fine. It does open up.
Wine advice from Rob Buckhaven.
Yeah.
I love it.
Anytime. And then, I'm trying to think of, the other one I did was rosé with a jalapeno pepper.
What did you think of that? Because the delicacies of rosé a lot of the time and a big old spicy zing. I know rosé goes well with actually a bit of spicy food, but I feel like a jalapeno, it depends on the wedge. It depends on the wedge size, surely.
Yeah, this was small. It was delicate. And it was his Cali rosé.
Okay.
So it was quite sweet. And I thought the savoriness offset it, not in a Provence rosé. And I think I even say in the video, not Provence, because it's so nuanced. It's very dry. It's sort of wafer thin in terms of, aromatics. So you can't destroy that balance. So we just go the other way.
Okay, so you can have a bit of fun with a rosé d'Anjou or a Cabernet d'Anjou. So the sweetest styles of rosé from the Loire Valley with a moderate to small slice or wedge of jalapeno.
Tiny, yeah. Just get a small, don't go crazy. Do not go crazy. That's the name of the game. But I think these things, and then I went a bit crazy actually. And what did I do? I did a gherkin. I did a cornichon. And then I did a pickled onion. And then I did...
Oh, you wild child.
I just was living on the edge. I don't know what happened to me. I don't know what came over me. But most of them were terrible. It's got to be said.
That's a shame.
Yeah. There's no kind of like, you heard it here first. They were all terrible.
Okay, so moving on from these trends, they don't last for long. So when you're not going around tasting different wines and planning your articles, obviously the wonderful part of your job is also getting to fly to different regions, get to know what's going on. So you told me you went to Thailand, of all places, just because Thai wine is a thing.
Taiwan is the thing, and
Well, it
this
is,
was
but
maybe, yeah, it is, but it isn't. And I remember being so fascinated, and it was a press trip. I mean, we get on some amazing press trips. It is amazing, and now it's another thing is there's so many great press trips. I will only say yes to them if I can write something about it. Whereas I used to just go on everything and just be like, yeah, it's a free trip. But they are actually quite hard work. They are, their itineraries are jam packed usually. You're always on, no matter if you're at a dinner, if you're at this event, you have to be on. They usually sit you next to the owner of the company or the winemaker. So you're constantly on. So I cherry pick, and this one was epic. So I couldn't go when all the other journalists were going. So I just went, look, I'm really sorry, I can't go on those dates. And they kind of went, well, look, we'll do a trip for you. And I went,
all right.
okay, all you need to do is get a commission in the metro. So I got a commission and then showed them it. And they were like, yeah, cool. Where do you want to go? So it was in conjunction with the Thai Tourist Board as well. And so I just picked where I wanted to go. They said, do you want to do some markets in Bangkok? Do you want to do this? Do you want to do, the floating markets? And I was like, all of the above. I want to do all of that.
Yes, yes, yes.
So the main thing, just cutting to the chase, the main thing was the vineyard. So I went to a vineyard and it was Monsoon Valley.
Yes, well, they are the biggest, aren't they?
They are the biggest, exactly. And this was helmed by a German winemaker who'd come over there, and she'd only been there for a few years, I think. And then we were talking about it, and she said to me, it's incredible here because obviously there are no seasons. So we have to make the vine think there are seasons by flooding the vineyards, by doing various things. And we have tried everything in terms of, because I was going, would this vine work here? With this, have you tried this? She was like, you're wasting your breath. We've tried everything.
Yeah, because it's tropical. It's a tropical weather.
Tropical.
Yeah.
It's a tropical weather. So she said, look, we've tried everything. And the ones that work are Chenin Blanc, Sangiovese was another one that worked. I know Merlot worked. So there were a few grapes that really worked. And so I was going, what about Tempranillo? She was like, yeah, that doesn't really work. I was going through them. What about Malbec? So it was just incredible. And their vineyards, there's a lot of tourism there. It was amazing. You just look into the distance and there's this like golden Buddha in the distance. And you're like, where am I? I'm in Thailand. This is ridiculous. But it was just incredible. Their wines, look, for what they go through, their wines are fine. They're not bad at all. And they probably improved since I've been there. They did a dessert wine. They did a sparkling. I was so impressed by how they could do it.
Now, but I'm wondering how they actually do trick the vines. Because as an example, I did a podcast on Brazilian wine, and in Sao Paulo, they actually invert the vines so that they make the vines sleep during the summer and wake them up in the coldest winter months, which aren't that cold.
It's not dissimilar. Yeah.
Okay, so they would call that vinos de invierno, so like winter vines.
Yeah, exactly. And it's basically a bit of trickery because you are then tricking the vine into thinking it's that season. So it is, and I can't remember what they actually call it, but I remember them thinking that is ingenious. That's such an ingenious. Then there's obviously canopy management and all of this kind of thing which you know about, but it's these other things that they have to go through because it's such a hostile environment for growing anything. That was amazing. So that was one of the wow moments of everything. I thought that was incredible. And then you get to go to places like sort of Provence, but I would only, love going to Provence. I thought it was a great press trip, but I would only go there if there was an angle.
Okay.
Because, even if it's 3 days, then you are still, that's 3 days you're taking out of your work schedule. So and being freelance, you can't really afford that unless you have a really good reason to go there. And I remember thinking that it's the same with Cava as well. The angle for Provence was that they were trying to de-seasonalize their wines because everyone thinks of Provence rosé as during the summer. And I know these guys were working so hard to go, no, we're not. Our aim is for people to sip rosé with their Christmas dinner. So I thought this was amazing. So they were sort of aging some of them in oak, and they were doing loads of good stuff that I just thought, wow. And I hadn't really tasted a Provence rosé that had been aged slightly in oak. I thought it was amazing. You have this richness that you don't associate with it.
I love it. Yeah, do you know, when I ever mention to people about oak aging with rosé, they're so shocked. But I mean, everyone's heard of Whispering Angel because it is the biggest marketed rosé in the world. Newsflash, everyone, I'm sorry to say it's really not the best rosé. However,
It's funny because I'm just writing a piece including Whispering Angel right now, actually. Yeah,
oh,
I
controversial.
know.
What are you going to
I
say?
know.
Are you going to be
Well,
gentle?
you're going to wait and see. I'm going to be gentle. But carry on, carry on.
Many people don't realize that Whispering Angel is part of Chateau de Escalans, and they have several wines above Whispering Angel. And if you can get your hands on, I mean, they have the Garous. Funny enough, Garous is higher than Les Clans, or Le Clan, if we're going to say in the French way. But I tasted the two of them next to each other only 2 weeks ago and actually really preferred Le Clan.
It's so bizarre, isn't it?
Yeah, because actually the oak seems to make it creamy and textural and rounded.
Because they do batonnage. I found Le Clan, spoiler alert, I found it like a white Burgundy because there was batonnage. So they were stirring the lees and they were leaving it on there. So it was getting creamier as well as the oak influence. So you had all of it. It was so well balanced. I agree. Garrus, I find too much. I find it almost too rich.
And it almost goes a little bit, almost starts going smoky, which I think with the right food. And also, granted, I tasted this at a tasting straight out of the bottle, having not decanted it and given it certain time. And this is the point. So Le Clan, when I bought a bottle of that myself, several years ago, it was about £40. It has to be about 50, 55 now or
It's
something.
65, I think, and 63, 65.
Punchy,
Yeah,
fine. Yeah. When you are spending that amount of money and then thinking about even the Garous, you really should be decanting it. You should make sure it's warm enough and not straight from an ice bucket or straight out of the fridge. These are phenomenal wines, actually. You hit the nail on the head when you said, like a white Burgundy, they have this absolute opulence and roundedness and beautiful defined fruits.
Yeah, and I remember it just being super aromatic as well. So we did this, and I hate a blind tasting. Hate a blind tasting. I really hate it because I'm the sort of person that overthinks things. So I get the right answer, and then I think myself out of that answer into the wrong answer. So we did a blind tasting of 8 different roses, including Le Clan, including Whispering Angel, including Ultimate Provence from Waitrose. So there were some really good ones. And there was a wine from Corsica. There was a wine. So this piece is coming out. And I remember just thinking, when I had Le Clan, I was like, this must be Le Clan. And then I talked myself out of it. And I was like, but it was so obvious. But it's so interesting to see how your brain works when you're just overdriving. You know, my thing is, when you are blind tasting, always go with your first instinct. Like, do not overthink it at all. Anyway, so it was very interesting. And I love the way rosé. So this is one of the things I got from going to Provence. I love the way they were working so hard to actually make this happen, you know, and the quality was sky high. They didn't want to just be known as a one-trick pony. And I think that was the same for Cava when I went there. And it was only a 3-day trip, but they showed us around everywhere. And I think when you go with a DO rather than just a single producer, your itinerary is so much more packed because they want to show you everything, you know, and they are so enthusiastic. So you're going, the minute you touch down, it's like lunch here, right? Then we have a tasting of this. Then you go over to this next one. Then you're seeing that. So you are fully booked for the whole time, as you should be. But Carver, I know we've talked about it, but I was really impressed by what they were doing there as well. So I will only go on these press trips if there is some kind of, it's not just the run of the mill, oh, let's see what they're doing. I kind of know there has to be something more.
But the great thing about this, and you're going all over the world and you're tasting these different wines, is that, like you said, you might hate a blind tasting, but you do start understanding and identifying different characters in different wines, what to look for, what's what. So is that what inspired you to write your book? So the Alcorithm, love it. The Alcorithm.
I love the pronunciation as well.
Oh, did I do good?
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right. But
great.
tell me about the book for a second. We'll go into detail what's in the books. Everyone, wait one. Why did you write it?
I wrote it during lockdown. So I'd always wanted to do a book. So I was doing my Metro column. I was a brand ambassador at that point, and I was doing so many things. And I'd always wanted to write a book. I'd done some TV, and I was really keen to write a book because I had it in my head that I just wanted a published piece of work that was mine, that was just there. I had my own thing. I remember I went to a Jancis Robinson launch of her latest edition of the Wine Atlas. I then chased her publisher around the room for the whole time. And I said to her, hi, sorry, can I have a meeting? I write for the Metro. And she went, yeah, sure, let's have a meeting. And from that moment on, we were discussing ideas, etc. And I was also approaching just via LinkedIn, trying to get other publishers as well. And must have sent her about 5 different proposals. And on the 6th one, she went, oh, there's something here. So I remember sending it round to a bunch of other publishers, like Bloomsbury, like, Penguin, and loads of them liked it. So this idea was the algorithm. So it was basically, Netflix does, if you like this film, you're going to like this film. I thought, no one's doing that for food or wine. No one is doing that. So I thought, why not use this algorithm, but I'll be the algorithm and I'll decide from my experience as a wine expert or drinks expert, if you like these flavors, you'll like these drinks. And it's not just wine. If you like chocolate, you're going to like X, Y, Z. You're going to like this cocktail, you're going to like this soft drink, you're going to like this coffee, you're going to like this, because I thought it's all about flavors, and people need the confidence to be directed around the drinks universe, and not just, there's lots of wine books that go, if you like this wine, you'll probably like this wine. But this is like, you're going to like the universe. This is what you should be drinking.
You've been working hard, eating and drinking everything for us. Thank you, Rob. Appreciate that.
Oh, okay. Yeah, you're welcome.
So we want to give people a little bit of a sneak peek so that they understand, like, okay, what are you suggesting? So now one of the flavor profiles you've suggested is, instead of a Bordeaux Cabernet Sauvignon, you've said go for a Touriga Nacional, which is the main red grape variety in the Douro region, Portugal. So what's your thinking on that? And I agree, but I can compliment that maybe afterwards. What's your reasoning?
Okay, I love Touriga Nacional because it's usually in a blend, as you say, it's usually in a port blend, but they're using it more and more as, a single variety. And so, what I love about it is it's more aromatic. So it's got sort of, violets, blueberries, plums, but it's also got bergamot. And it has, and this is what I delve into in my book. My first draft was full of these complex compound names because I was keen to get science behind it and say, look, what we're tasting and smelling in this wine, and we're comparing it to, say I'm comparing it to blueberries. Has it got the same compounds as blueberries, or has it not? Is it something completely different? So what I loved about this is Touriga actually shares compounds with bergamot. So you do so that's why they've done experiments where they will get a regular wine like a Merlot, and they will put an Earl Grey tea bag into the Merlot, and you'll have something very much resembling a Touriga Nacional.
What?
Because
Really?
you'll have these bergamot aromas coming through. I mean, it's a very rudimentary, silly one.
Okay.
It's like a trends piece, but there is something to be said for that. And I love the fact that I do get that bergamot that's lifted, kind of almost citrus coming through in that one, which is really unusual for a red wine. And then, it shares things with Cabernet, say the Cabernet in a Bordeaux, which has all those kind of mint and cassis flavors. So
you've stolen what I was going to bring up.
No, I'm sorry. So mint very much is in Touriga Nacional as well. It's that herbaceousness.
Yeah. You've got your dark fruits. It is full bodied. For me, it's almost like a Bordeaux blend that is beefier and warmer because, that's where it comes from. But with climate change, the alcohol levels in Bordeaux blends are going up all the time, and they're trying to bring it down. So actually, it's just like a juicier, rounder version. And because of the floral and slight mintiness mixed in with those fruits, I can see tick. I like it.
I like that you like it. That's brilliant. And you could also say that it shares elements with a Barossa Shiraz as well. So it's kind of in the middle of those. It's got certain sort of similarities with the austerity that it can come from a Bordeaux blend, but it's also got the voluptuousness, of a Barossa Shiraz, I guess, as well.
I like it. Okay, so going to white, because, we want to make sure equal opportunity for everybody here. So you said instead of an Albarino, which I love, from Rías Baixas in Spain, you have said, why not try Acertico, by the way, that I love, I assume from Santorini. You can get Acertico from the mainland. It just is not the same, and it's never as good as on the Santorini island.
Same.
Yes. The saltiness.
Yeah.
It's a good link.
The saltiness, it's a great link. Yeah, it's the saltiness. I remember I went to Santorini on a press trip. Sorry, dropping all these names, but it was really impressive, and I'd never been there. And it was literally as you'd expect, as you've seen on those postcards, that kind of azure blue sea and those really white buildings. And the wines, they were really championing Assyrtiko as their hero grape, and why not? It's amazing. And so I remember we did all these tastings and we were in Gaia, and tasting it by the sea. So obviously there's auto-suggestion because you're by the sea and you're getting this kind of salt in the air and, all around you. I was tasting these Assyrtikos and I remember saying to the winemaker, would you compare this to an Albarino? And she went, God, I'd never really thought about that. Yes, you could actually. There's definitely elements. What I love about Assyrtiko is it's much more unapologetically salty. It's very salty. It is.
And linear and like, hello, I am here. Albarino might be like, oh, hello, everyone.
Albarino's more sort of, yeah, all right, I've got a little bit of saltiness here. Yeah, exactly. But Albarino's got more of the kind of peach stone fruit. So this is much more kind of, to me, it's got more of the citrus, but loads more of that salinity. But I think they can be compared sort of roughly.
100%. So you've got that lovely acidity in both. You've got the salinity. Assyrtiko, for me, the mineral drive, and it obviously is insane. But also, again, it can be higher in alcohol as well. So then it tends to be quite a full-bodied wine. And if you compare that to Albarino, where so often they are stirring the lees, they are creating a lot of the good Albarinos have got this lovely texture and body to it. So I love that comparison. And especially with the saltiness, you can't go wrong.
Oh God, you cannot go wrong. And, it just makes them both really good food wines as well. What's by the sea? You get so much good seafood. They go so well, but they can go by themselves as well. I loved it.
I am very jealous that you've been to Santorini. It's still somewhere that I really want to go. And I think for so many people I've spoken to who've been on holiday in Santorini, I say to them, oh my God, did you go to a vineyard? And they say, oh, no, but we drove around and we didn't see any. And it's like, you didn't see any because they're just on the floor in these baskets. And people are so used to seeing.
I could not believe it. Yeah.
Things are starting to change now because they can't find the right labor in it. It really takes a skilled worker to prune. But typically, you imagine a vineyard, you think long rows, trellised. And here, these are the colora, which means, I think it means curl, actually, in Greek. So they're curling the vines into a basket, which is...
It is incredible. Wind kind of lashes around, and then you've got this kind of really arid, you've got really hot conditions, very arid, very dry, low rainfall. So you really need, they do have these in these baskets. They're quite big actually. They're much bigger than I thought. And I just found the whole thing was amazing. I mean, it's somewhere you don't really see it, but all the places I've been, it's like, I mentioned Priorat before. It's another place where you can't really replicate it anywhere else. You never really see that. It's the same for Santorini.
And at the end of the day, I would suggest to anybody, just if you're interested and you want to go somewhere really cool or quirky or different, just type in volcanic soils. So, obviously Santorini is this place with volcanic soils. When I think about Lanzarote, when I get people to Google the vineyards in Lanzarote, it's pure black, pure black soils. And they create like these little holes in the soil to protect the grapes from the wind. Obviously, you've got Tenerife, which has the most crazy type of trellising system. It's fantastic. So I'm like, I'm very upset I haven't been yet.
Yeah. Oh, you've got to go. I'm really surprised you haven't gone. I would have thought you had.
Well, you know why? I'm a cheapskate. And every time I'm like, where should I go on holiday? And I look at the flights, and Santorini's always like the most expensive. And I'm like, nah, I'll go to some other island.
Get on a press trip. Yeah.
Dio Santorini. Hello, Yanina calling.
Yeah. Hi.
Anyway, so right, okay, bringing us back to, we're going to go red again. You suggested instead of a Cabernet Franc, which I love for its elegance, I really like that you have taken people to Mencia in Spain, which is one of my favorite red grape varieties, because they share this, for me, this gravelly nature, but this softness and generally medium to full bodied. Like there's just this juiciness with this earthy gravel nature, right?
Yeah, I agree with you. And for me, with Cabernet Franc, I love Cabernet Franc, particularly from the Loire, because I find it really herbaceous. I mean, it can sometimes, a bit like Carmenere for me, it can sometimes border on too herbaceous and too almost green, too unripe in a
There's the
way.
challenge, yeah.
Yeah. I think if you don't get it right, but ripened properly, you get those lovely herbaceous, notes coming in. Mencia for me, all around the kind of Bierzo region, is all about that kind of smashed slate. And again, like Priorat, whether it is auto-suggestion, because sometimes you'll see, for example, in Chablis, when you've got the Kimmeridgian clay, which is all these smashed up marine fossils, you'll immediately think, oh, okay, I'm getting that sort of slightly mineral. I'm getting minerality from this. It's the same for Bierzo, same for Mencia. For me, it's this also suggestion, but I do find it, I like the lightweightness to it. I like the slightly herbaceousness to it. I love it. I just think for me, I get pomegranate and I get all of that kind of low-lying brush you get around there. It all comes into being in my mind when I'm tasting it.
I like that both of them, depending on where they're grown, they do sit in that, oh, hey, we've got some raspberries, but we've also got some like darker fruits as well. It's red and black. It's not one way or the other. So I think if people love the bell pepper, they need to stick with Cabernet Franc. But Mencia is just this absolutely delightful grape variety. And also, unless you're getting the bigger ones that they really do put in oak, but it's very judicious oak. They're ones that you can have a little bit chilled as well, just slightly as well. And I just love that.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's a purity to them, which I love. And, you get things like wild lavender and rosemary. And weirdly, when I was writing this book, I was learning as much about things like rosemary and lavender and what compounds they had. And the fact that you usually find them growing side by side, and they do share compounds. So now when I'm tasting things like, and that's another thing with tasting, to get the appreciation of wine and all these things that we see, lovely things, blueberries and rosemary and thyme, and to have an understanding of the compounds that thyme has, and then transpose that to wine and say, okay, so does this have the same as that, or does it have other compounds that are mimicking this, and how does that happen? I just found
Oh,
fascinating.
sciencey. I just like to pick up the wine and give it a sniff.
Oh,
So I'm going to finish off with one more, which is a classic for us Brits working in the wine industry, that you have said a Marlborough Sauvignon Blanc, if you want to do something different, you can go for an English Bacchus. Of course. Yes.
of course.
I'll ask you as if I don't know. Why did you choose that? I talk about this constantly in my job. I say this a million times a day.
Goodness.
Why did you recommend? I do.
Well, of course you would. Yeah. I mean, this must be a busman's holiday for you. Yeah. For me and you, Bacchus is, if people go, what does it taste like? Because obviously Bacchus is becoming England's hero white grape, like Sauvignon Blanc, the New Zealand, for example. And to me, they are very similar. You do get that nettle, you do get that gooseberry, you do get that sort of slightly tropical fruits, as well, which I love. And I just think it's got, and if you refer to my book, it's all about, with New Zealand, it's all about thiols. So thiols are the things with the precursors to the aroma. I'm not going to get too sciencey, but they are triggered by fermentation, and that is what gets the passion fruit, all these other lovely things that we describe them as. And for me, Bacchus has got all of those and more, and it's got the really light texture, it's got the citrus, it's got all of these different things going on. And I think they are very comparable.
So typically, actually, I think Bacchus can be even slightly more approachable for people and people's palates, because New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc tends to actually be just that little bit more acidic. And a lot of people sometimes want something that's not as intense. So Bacchus is it's high acidity, but not as. But also it's not as pungent. So you get these herbal aromas, you get always this kind of elderflower. Elderflower is always like something you want to look for if you're trying in a blind tasting to differentiate Bacchus and New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. But it just seems there's a lighter, slight more delicacy just with the Bacchus in comparison to New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, which is interesting.
I know what you mean. Yeah, that blossomy.
You have to remember that with Bacchus, Riesling is in its parentage. And so actually I find, so I've done a blind tasting.
Oh my God, who's getting scientific now? Wow.
I didn't want to show off.
Wow.
No, but so my mother loves Bacchus and she loves New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc. So one time I decided to do this blind tasting, 3 and 3. And I found it really interesting and actually quite difficult as well. But what I gleaned from that was one, actually, Bacchus, by the way, very often looks like water in your glass. Very disappointing, actually. So if it almost like doesn't look like it has a color.
It's got to deliver on everything else. Yeah.
But that's actually a really good way to, is this actually a Bacchus? Is it like almost water in your glass? So that's actually number one. But yes, it seemed to have more of the florals because Bacchus can be citrusy, it could be herby, and it can be tropical depending on when it's been picked. But equally, New Zealand Sauvignon Blanc, is it from the Wairau Valley? Is it, from the Awatari Valley? They can be, again, either more herbaceous or more tropical. So they don't necessarily have so much floral nature, the New Zealand Sauvignon Blancs, and I always tend to get more of that with Bacchus. So that is the slight difference.
Interesting. But I love what you mentioned, elderflower and elder blossom. And I love the fact that that's so English. It's such an English descriptor. And that's, that I quite like that because it does give the English stamp to it as well.
Elderflower and great. Hedgerow, if anybody really wants the tasting note.
Hedgerow, yes.
It could not be any more English.
Love that hedgerow. I had to, yeah. No, it couldn't. Hedgerow. And then I had to kind of unpack what hedgerow was, and hedgerow is any fruit that grows in a hedgerow, but then you get that herbaceousness as well from the leaves, from everything, from the bramble.
Oh my God. Do you know what? I just got some tomatoes, and sorry, everyone, I don't remember which tomatoes, but they were on the vine. But sometimes tomatoes are just so much better. And I pulled them out of the packet, and yeah, they were in plastic. Ugh. Anyway, but as soon as I got it out, first of all, I was hit with this herbaceous sweetness. And then this literally just happened yesterday. It's so vivid in my mind. Really literally fresh in my mind. And as I was picking off the tomatoes from the actual vine, and I was smelling the end of the stem, this sweet, floral, it was almost like there was some vanilla in there, which was so weird because it was so herbaceous, but it was this weird pungent, oh my gosh. And
I love it because tomato stalk always brings me back to Sauvignon Blanc.
Tomato leaf. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Tomato leaf, tomato stalk. But also it brings me to the Loire more than anything. I get this kind of, I get this sans puis fumé, sort of rather than the really over the top. So I love that sort of difference as well between the two. I know what you mean, that fresh, sweet.
I've got. I can't describe it any better than that. But everyone, just get a whole load of tomatoes on a vine and just give them a stiff. But so we've been talking about Bacchus, and actually, for both of us, it's quite something that we both have a passion. I am currently a brand ambassador for an English winery. You were a brand ambassador for an English winery. However, you started as a brand ambassador when there wasn't actually a brand, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I know. And I didn't know that was the case. I remember I was speaking on my interview. I kind of went, oh yeah, I couldn't find your wines on your website. He went, so this was the owner I was talking to, and he said, no, we don't have any. So we won't have any for a year and a half. And as a brand ambassador, how would you deal with that? And I kind of just thought, you go into this kind of like computing mode, when they just show lots of kind of sums and equations going on in the background. That's what was happening in my mind. And I was going, okay, we'd have to get creative. We'd have to bring people down here and get them immersed in it and, and get them excited about it, I guess. So that's what happened. So I got the job and I was with Rathfinney for 7 years. And I remember that it was through necessity. And I always think necessity is the mother of all invention. And it really is. And that's why I just thought, right, okay, so we have nothing to show people. I can't knock on the door of the Ritz and go, I can kind of describe what it tastes like. So I just thought, right, let's invite them down, because they all have downtime. They all have, sommeliers all have times when they're not so busy. So we used to bring groups of sommeliers down to taste out of tanks, to, to do all this stuff. They loved it. They couldn't get enough of it. They were like a kid in a sweet shop. We do blending, we do all of that. They'd be absolutely lapping it up. And by the end of it, you've got this loyalty that you've built up with them and this great kind of relationship. And it worked really well. That was kind of the crux of how I think we did so well, because we'd had a year and a half to kind of seed the market. And then we had a big launch at Somerset House, and it was a big thing. And I think we deliberately kept it away from journalists like myself. So no one could taste it. So journalists couldn't write about it. So they had to taste it at the same time as everyone else when it launched. And everyone was super curious. So yeah, but it was amazing. And I loved English wine. I miss it.
There's enough of it. It's growing. Don't worry. It's not going to run out. Now, you said about you were bringing people down to the winery and you were doing blending trials. And I have to say, they are some of my favorite things. What were you doing for the blending? So were you actually taking, because Rathvinny obviously is sparkling wines. They're not doing any stills, are they?
They do a little bit of still, but their focus is sparkling. Yeah.
And so was it simply looking at blending different proportions of Chardonnay, Pinot Noir and Meunier to see whose blend was best?
What I loved about Rathvinny is they were very much into their clones without getting too scientific. And I was really interested in the different clones they were using, because obviously they used a rootstock called Furcal, which was very deep rooting. The vine didn't get chlorosis. So it was against so it was very specific to chalk. And I love the fact that these clones of Pinot Noir, Chardonnay, and Pinot Meunier had been chosen especially to match this rootstock and to match the chalk as well. And I think what we do, and whenever I talk to a sommelier, I'd go into super because I know they're quite anarchy, a lot of these guys. So they love talking about what a different clone of Pinot Noir brought to the blend. And so what we try and do is almost a Van Clair tasting with some of them. So we get them in a room and we go, okay, so this is the 1067. This is what this brings in. This is the Dijon clone XXY. This is the Champagne clone. This is the Geisenheim clone. So we'd show them, and a lot of them hadn't done anything like this before. So we were actually sort of dismantling the sparkling wine, the base wine, and actually showing them what each of these clones brought to the blend. And obviously, every year they'd bring in a different thing because, they perform differently in different years, according to the weather. I just thought that was fascinating. So we bring them there.
I agree with you.
Is that what you do?
Yeah. So, and I'm lucky enough, I get to do blendings and tastings. And I think a lot of the time when you talk about clones, and I think it's so interesting for people listening, they might think, what are clones? And does it really make a difference? And, so this Pinot Noir is a bit different to that Pinot Noir. I can specifically tell you that the 828 clone, which is a Burgundy clone, is quite jammy and big and juicy and more red fruited with really soft chalky tannins. And then the Dijon clone 777, which everyone knows if they're into their clones, is actually more gravelly, more grippy, going towards darker fruits. And it's fascinating. And the same goes for Chardonnay clones. Again, if you compare, I'm just trying to think of two that I remember. 76 is more citrusy and linear and zingy. And then 96 is much more peachy and soft and rounded. And it is fascinating.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And there was one that Chardonnay clone, and I forget which one it was, and it almost tasted of muscat.
Wow. Yeah, okay.
It was that. It
aromatic
was really blossomy and grape aromatic, and I just thought, this is fascinating. So I love it. And I love the way they are just hand selected for this particular terroir. So yeah, we used to bring them down and sometimes we do a bit of let's do different blendings. And then they would blend one. Obviously, we're not going to necessarily use the blend but it's just a bit of fun. And then we do hand disgorgement as well. We do things like that. Dosage trials was a big one. So dosage for me was another one. So getting, obviously, dosage being the sugar grape must solution that you put in before the cork goes in. And for me, dosage makes or breaks a wine, it really does. But in minute quantities. So we always did it sort of zero dosage all the way up to 10 grams, and we work our way into the middle. And you usually found that when you'd start to get a sort of honey note on your lips and a bit cloying, you'd gone too far. The trick was not to add in anything. You wanted to just enhance what was already there. And I just thought that was amazing. And sometimes it was half a gram of something would make the difference, would tip the balance.
Right. So I was very lucky to be involved in British Airways dosage trials that we did because we were on British Airways last year. And this year as well, everyone.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, no. Anyway, and we sat down and we did from 4 grams through to 12 grams. And this was for Tim Jackson, Master of Wine, to decide what does he want on the plane. And it was fascinating that obviously at the 4, the same sparkling wine, I should add, was very chalky. It was very linear. It was very pure. And obviously at the 12 grams, kind of makes sense. It seemed super fruity, really round, really opulent, really giving. Anyway, the fascinating thing was that as we got, we were taking notes for every single different gram. You could be, I remember, I might be getting it slightly wrong, but 6 and 8 were like really red fruited. And yet 7 grams made the whole thing super citrusy. You were like, what?
Isn't that crazy? Yeah.
It just blows your mind.
It blows your mind. And did you also find that the more dosage you put in, the shorter the length? We found that constantly. I thought it was, I think we'd get up to, because I think Rathfinny, the most we ever put in was 5 grams. So it's always low dosage. And that wasn't because we wanted a low dosage, it's because the fruit was super ripe.
You're planting on chalk soils, aren't you? Rathfinny's on chalk, whereas Balfour, we have some chalk soils and we have some green sands, but actually the majority, the biggest percentage is clay. So again, you and I probably don't know enough because my God, it's just like, it's crazy. But the flavors, like for us, the Balfour style is very much about fruit first. And so actually, I think can handle more dosage, whereas Rathfinny on chalk and I like the purity of less sugar and it comes out more. So quite clearly with chalky soils, maybe really you don't want to be putting in so much dosage.
I think you're absolutely right. You're right. Because, it is interesting. I read this piece by Margaret Rand, and I think it was in the World of Fine Wine. And she had done a whole article on chalk, mainly focusing on chalk, but I think she mentioned other soils as well. And she was saying, and I might be butchering this, but I think she said that the difference between, because it's not just a poetic thing. You say, chalk is very minerally, again, autosuggestion. But she said chalk and, the type of chalk that's in Sussex in particular gives you a very balanced mouthfeel so it's not just you get a hit of acidity and then it kind of disappears. She said it's very balanced. It goes throughout. Whereas she said clay, particularly I think she was mentioning Kent actually, so this would be applicable. She was saying, so clay gives the wine much more fruit character. So it's more about fruit. Exactly what you've said.
I always say fruit and depth in clay soils, electricity in chalk soils, and then this aromatic floral nature softness in green sand soils, which are the eroded chalk. It's fascinating.
It is so fascinating. Yeah. We could have a whole episode on this. And you probably have, to be honest.
No, I haven't. But I think I'll have to find someone who's like an absolute soil geek because that
Get Margaret Rand.
Thank you very much. A good suggestion. So I'm going to finish off this episode with a bit of fun because just like you said at the beginning, all these TikTok trends and things that you are having to test out. One of the things going around at the moment is this kind of like, what is the best wine to have with certain crisps and snacks, which I think is fascinating. Move aside pies. Like, let's look at our crisps. I think I'm going to do it soon. Okay, so I want you to tell me. I'm not going to make you guess one. You have to pick between 2. Okay, so.
This is going to be a quick fire round, right?
Yeah, that's it. So, sour cream and chive Pringles. Are you going to go with a Chardonnay or a Sauvignon Blanc?
I'm going to go with a Chardonnay. Just because I think that I don't want to get too scientific into chives. But with chives, you've got this kind of sulfurous nature, almost like, so it's the same fat, similar aromatics to onions, etc. So I just feel that a Chardonnay has the broadness to actually cope with that.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good.
And it's equally, you've got a bit of acidity there for the cheese as well, which needs that.
Lovely. Okay, good explanation. Salt and vinegar potato chips. Are you going to go with a Riesling or Your good friend Albarino.
Do you know what? I think I'd go with a Riesling, but I would go with something like a Clare
Okay.
Valley Riesling. So I would go with something sort of higher altitude. I'd go with something leaner. So you've still got those lovely aromatics that Riesling has. You've still got a touch of texture, a little bit of that sweetness as well, but it would be on the drier side. And I think that would go really well.
What about Walker's Ready Salted Crisps? Are you going to go English sparkling wine or Prosecco?
I'm going to go Prosecco on this one. I'm going to go Prosecco because I think you've got a blank canvas here. I think there could be a touch. I mean, English sparkling wine to me has a lot of salinity anyway, so you don't want to double down on that. So I think Prosecco, that would offset it really well, really nicely. And I'm talking a brute Prosecco. You don't want to go too, extra dry or anything. Yeah, too sweet. But I would say something like mini cheddars would be really good for an English sparkling wine.
Oh,
I think
that's a
that
bit
would go
more.
perfectly because I always find that English sparkling wines go very well with cheese things. So we had a thrice cooked cheese souffle at the Gavroche when it was still around. That went with our Blanc de Blanc, and I've never tasted anything like that pairing. It was insane.
You heard it here first.
Insane.
Okay, moving on before I start salivating. The Tyrrell's Smoky Texas Barbecue Crisps with, this one I feel is tough, Malbec or Shiraz?
Malbec, because I think with Shiraz and Syrah in particular, you get a smokiness anyway. So you don't want to, again, I don't want to double down on that. Sometimes I find with food pairing, you're either doubling down on something or you're not. You're going the opposite. And I think with this one, the opposite. I think Malbec's got enough little spice to offset that. But yeah, I wouldn't do both.
Beautiful explanation. Okay.
Well, thank you.
Now, what about this? The prawn cocktail skips. I have not eaten any of these since I was a child.
I love them.
Provence Rosé or a Riesling?
Provence Rosé.
Okay.
What do you think?
I asked these because I've picked two that I would always pair with both of them, so that's why. I think that prawn cocktail is really aromatic, so I might lead towards a Riesling, something that's really floral and peachy and just, and it's obviously got the striking acidity. It's just going to cleanse everything. I mean, you can't go wrong. Now we've just
you
gone
just
for...
can't. Yeah.
We'll go for crack open both bottles. Okay. And to finish off with, what about Sensations Thai Chili Crisps with, I'm either Grenache Rosé or Pinot Gris.
God, it's a tough one, isn't it? I would go for a kind of opulent Pinot Gris. I think an Alsace Pinot Gris. Because I think there you get, Pinot Gris Pinot Grigio can be a little bit neutral. So I think with that texture, that roundness, and sometimes, a little bit of a touch of kind of sweetness in there as well, I think it would go really well. Because the thing with chili, not that these are particularly hot crisps, but anything with chili, you want that fruit, you want that roundness, you want a bit of voluptuousness. I just think a rosé, no matter Grenache, yes, it's crowd pleasing, but it will still be quite sort of lean.
You need a bit more sweetness.
A bit more sweetness, yeah. Otherwise, you get the clash, and you don't want the clash. No one wants that.
Thank you, Rob. That was lovely. Beautiful explanations. I think I'm going to go off and go and eat some crisps now.
I am. It's that time, isn't it? It's 5. So let's do it.
It is time. Right. Yeah. Well, you know what I'll be doing. I'll be thinking of you whilst you're eating your crisps. You can think of me.
I'm reading my book. Yeah. So.
Oh, and of course. Well, everybody, the link for the book will be in my show notes. So thanks, Rob.
Yanina, thank you so much. I've had so much fun.
Me too. See you later. Bye.
Let's do it again. Bye. Bye-bye.
So as you guys all know, it's been amazing this season. I have the incredible support and sponsorship of Wickham's Wine, who are an awesome online retailer. If you haven't gone over there yet, they have, I've double checked, a Menthea, if you want to give that a go, and they have Bacchus. So if you're feeling it, pop over to their site. The link is in my show notes to their website. And don't forget, on your first order, if you use the code EATSLEEP10, you will, of course, get 10% off. Now, to finish off with, I have a wine quote for you all. And I mean, this episode has been about wine flavours after all. And so this is a quote from Louis Pasteur. Louis Pasteur is the famous French chemist and microbiologist who lived in the 19th century and is famous in our wine world for being the person who worked out that it was microorganisms that were responsible for fermentation. Now, he is known to have said, "The flavour of wine is like delicate poetry." And it is. That's why we need to decant things or perhaps use a NutriBullet, because each sip reveals layers of different nuances and it's our job to interpret each flavour. Now, next week, I'm really excited to say I am talking with Rodolphe Depin from Château de Montfaucon in the Larac wine region of the southern Rhone Valley in France. And this episode is going into detail on Larac, a wine region, a cru that is very often overshadowed by its more famous neighbours such as Châteauneuf-du-Pape and Gigondas. And so you are going to learn, and I am promising you'll be very excited and ready to go and visit this region after next week's episode. So until then, my wine friends, pour yourself that glass, keep reflecting, keep learning, and I'll see you back here next week. Until then, wine friends, cheers to you.